Welcome guys in this video session. So in this video we will discuss basically types of the Z transform. So there are the two types of Z transform. One is the one-sided Z transform and other is the double-sided Z transform basically. So we also called as bilateral Z transform to the double-sided Z transform, or we can say bilateral Z transform is a double-sided Z transform basically. So firstly we will discuss the one-sided Z transform basically. What is one-sided Z transform? Basically one-sided Z transform is a transform where for the discrete type signal, for the values of discrete signal x of n has transform or analyze the values from 0 to infinity, means positive values, for positive values of the discrete signal. Basically it will basically transform the positive values of the discrete signal, that is from 0 to plus infinity, these values. This is called basically one-sided Z transform, or single-sided, we can also call it as single-sided Z transform basically. Here we are transforming over this discrete signal into Z domain, this to this, and the equation for that x of z, that is equal to summation the value starting, the discrete value starting from 0 to plus infinity basically, and here x of n, z of minus n basically. Here this x of n have the discrete values of from 0 to plus infinity. These discrete values can be transformed or analyzed with the help of Z transform in the single sided basically. So this is called as known as one-sided Z transform, or we can say single-sided Z transform. So second one is, let's move to the second part of this, that is bilateral or double-sided Z transform basically. So for this bilateral or Z transform, here the discrete values of the signal that will be transformed, the discrete values from minus infinity to plus infinity basically. All the positive and negative values of the discrete signal that can be basically transformed or analyzed with the help of this Z transform basically, that is called bilateral transform. Here also basically these x of n values Z transform by these are converted from this to this. So here the equation for basically equation for this equation for x of z, the expression for this bilateral Z transform, that is will be equal to n is equal to minus infinity to infinity, only difference is this, and x of n, z of minus n. Basically the values from minus infinity to values from this minus infinity to plus infinity, and for these values means double-sided values, all the positive and negative values can be analyzed here with the x of n represents the values n values, and n in the n have the all the negative and positive values from minus infinity to infinity, and z of n is the basically a complex variable or complex system. In the z of minus n have real and imaginary values and that will be multiplied with this discrete values from minus infinity to plus infinity, and these values are analyzed with the help of Z transform in the bilateral basically bilateral transform here. So this is called as, we can known as bilateral Z transform, or we can say this is a double-sided Z transform here. So this is a Z transform of for the both types, single-sided and double-sided Z transform here. Next we will discuss basically what is Z domain basically. So firstly, Z domain is the basically a plotting technique. Z domain is the plotting technique for the plotting the real and imaginary parts of this basically Z transform, and here basically this here basically these are the x-axis and these are the y-axis. So on the y-axis, imaginary parts of this Z transform that will be plotted, and on the x-axis the real parts basically of this Z transform will be plotted. So real and imaginary parts that will be plotted on this x and y axis of Z transform. This is called the Z domain. So basically, and here some zeros and poles that are plotted or displayed on this axis. So that this topic we will discuss in the later video. And here basically in the Z transform we only converting basically here for basically this is a basically a discrete signal, and this one is a transformation of discrete signal to Z domain, basically Z transform basically. So here x of Z is a discrete form of this transform form of analyzed form of the Z transform of discrete signal basically. So here if we find out the Z transform, then we consider the equation x of Z, that is equal to summation of that from minus infinity to plus infinity, the value of n, and here x of n, that is Z of minus n. This is for this equation for finding out the simply Z transform of any digital signal. And if we want to find out the inverse of Z transform of any signal, then we will type the equation here, x of basically this is x of n, that is equal to summation same n is equal to minus infinity to infinity. Here in the replace this x of n to x of basically Z, so Z raised to power minus n. So basically this equation we will be follow to find out the inverse of this Z transform, or simply we will consider x of, for finding out x of n means Z inverse of this x of Z basically. So follow this equation to find out the inverse of this Z transform. So guys, that's all for this today lecture. So if you really something get from my video, then please subscribe my channel and like the video. If you have any query regarding any video, then please write it